In order to find the area of this triangle, what you need to do is identify what the lengths are for AB, BC, and CA. So we can use the distance formula for each of these. Each one's going to be the square root of the difference of the x's. So 5 minus a negative 20 squared, plus the difference of the corresponding y's, 18 minus a negative 3 squared. If we simplify what we have right here, we get 25 squared plus, here we have negative 18 plus 3 gives us negative 15 squared. And so if we calculate that, we get root 850. And BC, here when we take these, we get negative 20 minus a negative 2 squared plus, and C, or for the y's, we get negative 3 minus 9 squared. So again, if we simplify what we have here, we get negative 18 squared plus, here we get negative 12 squared. That gives us 468. And then finally for CA, we take difference of their coordinates, negative 2 minus 5 squared plus 9 minus a negative 18 squared. And so when we simplify that, we get negative 7 squared plus, here we get 27 squared. We get 778. Okay, so what we want to do with this calculation is we want to determine what type of a triangle. We can see, is the sum of the squares of the two smaller sides equal to the longest side? If so, you have a right triangle, which would be the easiest one to calculate. That is not the case here, so we have a non-right triangle. So what we can do is we can just label our sides. We have root 850, we have root 468, and we have root 778. Once we know the three sides, what we can now do is find the area by using some trig ratios. So in order for us to set this up the way I have it, root 850 is going to be my base. So the area formula for my triangle, 1/2 base times height. We're going to use a base of root 850. So we need to know what this corresponding height is. Well, in order to find this height, we need either of these two angles. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go ahead and use the smaller of the two here. So I'm going to find this angle right here so that I can then calculate my height. So to find this angle, I can have the pattern of SSS. SSS indicates that we're going to use the law of cosines to find this angle. So when I set up the law of cosines for this whole red triangle here, I'm going to start with the side opposite that. So I'm going to take root 468 squared and set that equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So root 778 squared plus root 850 squared minus 2 times the quantity root 77 or 778 times root 850 times the cosine of that unknown angle, which I'll call theta. Okay, so now it's just a matter of solving this. Remember, if you are going to use the solve feature on this, what we're going to do is we are going to let x be this whole cosine ratio. So we're going to substitute x in here and solve. So if I set up my equation solver, solve, I'm going to go ahead and just simplify. The square root and the square cancel. So I get 468 is equal to 778 plus 850 minus 2 times, now I have to go ahead and use the radicals. Square root of 778 times the square root of 850 times, now I'm going to again replace this whole trig ratio cosine of theta with x, and I'm going to solve for that. When I get my solution, and I'm going to use a decimal, so I get my answer as a decimal. When I get my solution, this is the cosine ratio for our unknown. Okay, so I know that since x is 0.713, and that's equal to the cosine of theta, I can actually solve for theta by taking the inverse cosine of that ratio. So if I now go back here and I take my inverse cosine of this ratio, I get my solution. This angle measure is 44.5. So I found my angle measure. Once I have this angle measure, I can now go back one more time and use the following trig ratio, just a regular SOHCAHTOA trig ratio to find h. I have an angle, I have an opposite side, and I know the hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse are related by the trig ratio sign. So the sine of 44.5 degrees is equal to the opposite side h over the hypotenuse root 778. So if I multiply both sides by root 778, I get my h value right here. So that's root 778 times the sine of 44.5. And I get my final calculation, 0.5 times the square root of 850 times the square root of 778 times the sine of 44.5. Again, I'm going to highlight this exact value here. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this, the quantity equals. So there's my final entry. And so my overall answer winds up being 285 as my area. There's no units here, so I'll just label it square unknown units u. But it is still a two-dimensional measurement.